Hi, I'm Kristel Riddervold, Charlottesville's Environmental Sustainability Manager. I was recently joined by Emily Irvine, our Climate Program Specialist, in delivering a presentation about Charlottesville's newly adopted Climate Action Plan to the Piedmont, Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club on February 8, 2023. Afterwards, we felt it was worth sharing this presentation to help make the Climate Action Plan more accessible to more people. We hope you find the short video useful in learning about Charlottesville's plans for reducing our community's greenhouse gas emissions and reaching our climate action goals.
The agenda you see here is basically a listing of the topics we want to run through, so you have an idea of what the plan is, what's in it, what the strategies are, what the sectors are that are involved, and then also kind of our looking forward plans. So if we can go to the next slide, I do want to take really an earned community moment that we have a plan. Charlottesville has its first official climate action plan. It's been many years in the works. Then it went into fast forward in terms of development. We had a lot of really amazing and informative and intentional and valued input and engagement. So I do want to thank everybody who participated in that process. A lot of communities have climate action plans. One thing that is unique is that in Charlottesville, our plan was actually formally adopted as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And that sounds kind of bureaucratic, but it's actually very significant because a comprehensive plan is the roadmap to what the community is tackling and investing in moving forward. So having the climate plan part of the comprehensive plan, I think gives it some really robust legs that is important to the work that's ahead of us. So for anybody who wants to help participate in the sounds, we had a little icon that was supposed to be clapping, but we're going to have to do it ourselves. Okay, thank you. Thanks for humoring us. But yes, we could not have done this ourselves. We did not write this in a silo. This is informed by and informed with a lot of really important input. So we can go to the next slide at kind of a high level to let everyone sort of orient ourselves. The Charlottesville Community Climate Action Plan, it's intended to be a strategic roadmap. It's the what we need to do, not the details of how we do it. It's really important to start us off with what we need to do to meet our climate action goals. And it is a dynamic document. So just because this is the first one doesn't mean it's going to be the last one. It will be updated regularly. We will be working on identifying tangible, measurable sub-goals and other key actions that help us move forward. So the goals that we're talking about, not that I imagine you don't know this already, but the goals are a 45% reduction in emissions by 2030, and then carbon neutrality by 2050. And these goals are scientifically informed based on the IPCC recommendations. So this is the level of commitment that is needed at all scales involved in doing climate work. The plan has a set of what we refer to as guiding principles that we took into consideration when we developed the plan, and these guiding principles apply to every section of the plan and all the strategies and actions. The one I do want to call out is the one you see in this green bar here, and that is that climate action has to be effective, affordable, equitable, and inclusive. And there are other really important guiding principles, but this is one I think we really try to keep front and center so that we don't miss the mark on what we are trying to achieve. So besides the big goals, the ones under the dark blue bar, we have strategies, and the strategies are enduring, which means they are meant to be relevant now and in the future. And then the key actions are the ones that are considered more dynamic. So think of them as the to-do list or the action items. They're the things that we, both the city government as an organization and we as the wider community will be taking over the next few years. And essentially, as we accomplish things or as we complete things, we cross them off the to-do list. And as part of that dynamic document, they need to be replaced with the next action that really takes its place and requires our attention. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. I'm not asking you to read the gory details on here. We don't need to go into it, but just a reminder about how this document is organized. So beyond the basic introductions, we have guides for actions, and that includes the link that a lot of these strategies and actions have other co-benefits in the community, whether it's clean air or access to food or increased recreational and amenities. There's a whole host. I think we've got a page and a half of bullets that really, if we're doing climate work, we're doing other work that's good for our community for day-to-day quality of life. So this isn't just for GHG reductions, but we're going to accomplish a lot of other positives alongside. Then there are several sections that present strategies and actions that are community-based, and those address several key areas, and I'll talk to that about in a little bit more. And then really also presenting municipal actions, but also opportunities. The city as a local government has some really unique opportunities to do things in the climate space. And so the document covers some of those. And then obviously at the very end, not only does it include next steps, but we wanted to capture some of the other important topics that go beyond climate mitigation, which is the reduction of emissions, but some of the things that are referred to as drawdown or carbon sequestration, or things that are important from a true sustainability perspective, have maybe a dashed line to climate, but are important to acknowledge as we do this kind of work. All right, so as a reminder, and for context, this is where the greenhouse gas emissions from Charlottesville come from. When you think about what was referred to as our carbon footprint, 95% of the emissions come from activities that are community activities, driving, buildings, waste, things like that. And then 5% can be tied to operations, programs, and services that the city has responsibility for, whether it's our portfolio of buildings, the public transportation component, street lights, those elements that have government control or ability to influence. And then when you look a little further, the proportion of emissions in our greenhouse gas inventory come from these main sectors. So it's a pretty even split, 30%, 30%, 30% from the residential sector, the commercial sector, and the transportation sector, and then a remaining piece from the waste sector. And if you look at this split of emissions in some other communities, you see significant differences, and a lot of that is reflective of what kind of a community it is. If it's a large county with a large urban area, you're going to have a larger transportation footprint. If you have an industrial community in, say, Ohio, you may have a portion of your emissions associated with an industrial sector that we don't really have reflected in Charlottesville. So that's sort of the explanation about why it falls out this way. But what you see here informed the development of the plan, and it informs the areas that our actions need to be focused on. And then also as a reminder, and for context, here's just a very simple graph of greenhouse gas emissions from Charlottesville showing where we've been since we were doing inventory work, and then generally where we are now, which is kind of the tail end of that green section, and then where we need to go to meet the 2030 and the 2050 goals. And the general takeaway is we are moving in the right direction. The other takeaway is we got a long way to go. And so it's not that we can just rest on our laurels and say, we're doing a good job, and if we just keep doing this, we'll get there. We need to scale up, and we need to expand scope of what's going on. And that's how we tackled this climate action plan. So when we're talking about reducing emissions from the sources that we talked about, there's three broad ways of doing that. The first one is to reduce the emissions intensity of an activity. So an activity is something like transportation. Reducing the intensity is changing the emissions that come from the moving around. So or changing the emissions from how a building is operating. So that looks like energy efficiency, switching out light bulbs, upgrading mechanical systems to efficient systems, walking instead of driving, increasing larger public transportation. The second method is what we call fuel switching. So that's essentially where you're changing the source of energy from a current footprint to a lower or a zero emission source. And that looks like switching from an oil-fired boiler to a heat pump. So taking something that's a fossil fuel petroleum product and using a power source that over time, coming from the electric grid, should have a smaller footprint as more renewables are brought onto the grid. Or it looks like installing solar on your house. So even instead of using the electrons that are coming from the grid, you're using full-on solar energy, sunshine electrons in your building. And then the third way to remove emissions is what often is referred to as drawdown, or pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. And so that includes tree planting, other vegetation deployment, but it even includes technology that is called carbon capture and storage, and things which, again, they may not be immediately available or accessible today, but as we talk about goals that are several decades out, we need to be tracking those and seeing where the opportunities are. And then, kind of embedded and entwined in these different ways of reducing emissions, there are funding and financing tools, opportunities, things that we need to be looking at and either building into or linking into that help our residents and businesses access support to do the things, the reduction, the switching, and the drawdown. I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Emily so that she can talk about some of the strategies in the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Kristel. That was great. So now that you guys have a little bit of background, we can get sort of into the bulk of the plan, which are these strategies that we talked about for reducing emissions. So I'm going to start by talking about the community-based strategies. And this chapter is divided into 5 sections, which you can see up here. So Kristel talked about the difference between the strategies and the key actions, and I'm going to stay kind of on the high-level strategies for reducing emissions in each of these sectors. I think we're going to put a link to the actual plan, and if you want to get into the weeds with all of the many key actions, then we encourage you all to take a look at the plan when you can, and maybe some of you already have. So you can see here, for example, that within the buildings and energy section, we focus both on reducing our emissions through energy efficiency and also fuel switching to renewables. And then in the transportation section, we discuss emissions through driving less, and there are, of course, several ways to do that, and fuel switching by supporting the move to electric vehicles. And the nature-based solutions section, we focus on drawing carbon down out of the atmosphere by protecting and preserving our green spaces. And then, as Kristel mentioned, funding and financing is really a supportive mechanism for supporting the transition through innovative and outside funding sources. And I can tell you that at the moment, with all the federal funding coming, Kristel and I spend a lot of time thinking about, talking about, studying about how we are going to help our community to take the best advantage of those opportunities that are coming. So just as we need to reduce our emissions out in the community, the city also has a responsibility to reduce emissions from our municipal operations as well. And so this slide summarizes the broad strategies that we are either already employing or planning to employ to do that. And so, of course, many of the strategies are the same. For example, energy efficiency for municipal buildings and solar deployment and vehicle electrification. Part of the plan is that the city has a goal of carbon neutrality for all of our city facilities by 2030. And so this will be achieved through energy savings methods, solar, on-site solar, and then also virtual power purchase agreements to buy off-site renewable energy. And so the city also has additional considerations. For example, the need to convert all of our city street lighting and traffic signals to LEDs. And of course, the city owns the natural gas utility, for which a decarbonization study is just getting underway. So we have a plan. And so a lot of people are saying kind of like, okay, well, what are you guys going to do now? And plan implementation is underway. We are working to develop measurable success indicators for each key action. Kristel mentioned that. And that's there's a lot of effort that goes into that, because there are so many different types of actions that we need to take. It's not as cut and dry as, each action has sort of a different success indicator that we're working to figure out, and also learn how to share with our community, because reporting and accountability is a big part of this. So we want to make sure that we get that right. We have already started working with both our counterparts in other departments within the city and community partners to start moving CAP strategies and actions forward. And that looks like a lot of different coordination efforts. We are working to opt Charlottesville into the state's CPACE program. That's a goal we hope will become a reality in the near term. And of course, I mentioned we spend a lot of time learning about and applying for grants and learning about the federal opportunities. We mentioned that there's a couple of studies that are underway that will inform key actions and ongoing activities. On our docket for 2023 is getting our climate adaptation planning underway. That's a commitment that we have under the Global Covenant of Mayors that we are part of. I'm sure some of the folks in the audience this evening participated in some of our risk and vulnerability assessment work that was done last year, and we're working to push that forward. And so, we acknowledge that we need to all work together to achieve these lofty and really critical goals. And we feel, and we want you all to feel, that this is a community plan. And so that means we want the community to feel ownership over the goals and also empowerment to act towards them. So with that, on that note, you guys are all invited to an event that we're hosting in a few weeks called Acting on Climate Together. So this is going to be a city-sponsored community event, and it's aimed at helping us to sort of paint the landscape or get our arms around the action that's happening out in the community. We know that a lot of people in Charlottesville and the broader area are involved in climate action. And part of the climate plan is being able to report out and measure our success. And so we're really trying to bring the community together to network and learn about what actions are already happening, and to share ideas for how we can work together to multiply climate action in our community. So it's designed to be an interactive drop-in event. We won't be doing any presentations like this one, but it's going to be on March 15th from 4 to 7 p.m. at Carver Recreation Center. We hope you all can join us.